Welcome, Scott.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me on.
Good to have you back. Scott Peper with Mobilization Funding. Before we dive into learning all about financing, Luka Doncic. I don't have many people to talk about basketball with. So, former collegiate basketball player like yourself, Luka Doncic.
To me, like, my personal opinion is that he's just, obviously he's very good, no secret there, but a lot of times when I'm describing him to people, they're like, why is he good? He looks slow.
Right.
This. The first thing I always describe to people, like, his combination of size with his skills is a real separator. His combination of weight, he's a big dude for an NBA locker room.
Sure.
A lot of people realize that. Not height, but like even height in an NBA locker room, if you look at their weight, they're like 220, 225. So like anybody rolling at 240, 245 and 6'7", 6'8", people don't realize how hard that is to move and like what kind of force that can create. So that's first. And when you're that heavy against someone lighter, it doesn't matter how athletic they are. When you're 2 feet from each other, the athleticism kind of goes away to a degree. And then he's sneaky athletic. He looks slow compared to the athletes in the NBA. He's not really that slow. And then his combination of shooting skill with his handle and like that slow delivery of moves. And people, if you watch his game, he's extremely efficient in his moves. Straight lines, direct cuts. Not like Steph Curry who runs around does the same thing, but just at a different speed. And like, he has a full game. Like, he can get a shot. And then the thing I love about him, and you can see it now in the playoffs where you don't really see it in the regular season, he believes he's the best player in the court. And he gets into it by getting himself developed. And so, I don't know if anyone saw his stat lines, but I think in points, rebounds, assists, steals.
I agree on Luka. I'm amazed. The guy's like 24 years old, led the NBA in scoring, is like what you said. He's like 6'7", 6'8", 245. And what amazes me is that you have all of these athletes in the league and no one can do anything with them. Like, there's no, like, they used to, it became a joke. Like, you have guys like Ruben Patterson, who was like super physical. They called him like a Kobe stopper. And he didn't stop Kobe, but you would have these guys who at least would make it known, like, it would be more difficult for someone to score that night. And Luka just seems to dominate whoever it is. Like, doesn't matter if they're 6'9" or if somebody puts like a 6'5" guy on him who's uber athletic. He just gets whatever he wants when he wants.
Yeah.
So it's incredible.
And look, he plays good defense. He's never going to be the best defender.
No.
For the same reasons that he's a great offender. He's a little too heavy, but it's like, but it doesn't mean he's a weakness.
No, and he's also paid to score, so you
Correct.
don't want your
He's going
guys
to counteract his defender by 20 points.
He's a great passer too. Like, they the clips that you see, like pick and roll, and he's throwing lob after lob, like, and he'll throw crazy like cross court passes to open shooters. Like, he's at that age to have like the total package is pretty outrageous.
Yeah, and I love that Kyrie on that team because now especially in the playoffs and especially in the fourth quarter and especially when you're in any type of close game, single digits, it's such an advantage because you got two guys that can create their own shot. You got two guys that can pass. Kyrie can get anywhere he wants on the court, anytime he wants. He can score, and so you can't double.
No, and that's the thing too with Luka is you have Anthony Edwards, which kind of exploded this season, and he's incredible. But I remember when Luka was 22, like a couple years ago, and the moment wasn't too big. Like, it was kind of clear, like, Edwards kind of ran into kind of a wall at the end where he wasn't as dominant. And I remember Luka in like Game 7 against Phoenix a couple years ago where he had like 40. And that was at 22 years old or 23 years old. So he has this ability that no moment is too big for him, which is pretty uncommon. Now, Anthony Edwards, I think, is going to figure it out. Like, it's going to be scary what he does 3 years from now. But, like, Luka was this way out of, like, as soon as he entered the league, which is wild.
Yeah. See, I think I think Anthony Edwards knows he's great, knows he's a great talent, knows he's a great athletic, but he doesn't know how. He's not a great scorer yet. I know people probably bang their forehead on the ground when I hear me say that, because he can definitely score. But what I'm talking about, the difference to Luka, is you have to also be a great shooter to score a lot of points. You just can't score a lot of points consistently without being able to shoot. And Anthony Edwards can shoot, but you can tell he's not super comfortable with it. And when you compare it to like his own shooting ability compared to like a Luka or a Steph, and he's going to get that in the next 3 years. Yeah, and I also think he just surprised himself this year. I think he finally realized, like, damn, I'm pretty good.
Yeah,
like,
he doesn't know. Like Luka knows, like if he has the ball and there's 2 minutes left, he like knows I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna get this type of shot. And I don't think Anthony Edwards knows yet, because he's so athletic. He can kind of do what he wants, but you got to have like a go-to. So I just needed to get that out of my system, because I can't really talk basketball with many people. You know, I laugh because like in preparation for this, you know, so people at Heave like didn't even know who Luka Doncic was. So, you know, I need some kind of basketball talk.
It's good. Well, there's a lot of synergies in basketball to construction or business, so there's plenty of parallels there.
So you're founder of Mobilization Funding. Just kind of, you know, you've been on our podcast before, which was great. So I didn't want to get into your total background, because you've covered that before, but just like a quick like intro of Mobilization Funding, who you serve, and what your company is based on. So
we serve commercial subcontractors, some general contractors that are doing self-performing work. Those are our primary customers. And then other businesses like manufacturing or fabrication, ancillary to construction, but also they might be creating something, making something. What we're really good at is analyzing what people have an opportunity from a growth perspective. So in construction, it's easy. You have that additional project. You have the larger projects. You have projects you're working on 1 or 2 at a time. Now you're working 2 or 3 at a time. Your customer's giving you $400,000 or $500,000 projects. Now they're giving you $1 million or $2 million projects. And every time you go to do that growth curve, it's like one of those scenarios where you're hustling along and things are well and you're knocking it out. And while you're growing your business, you're on top of everything and it's easy. Or it's easier.
Sure.
And then as you start to grow, you have to start relying on more people. And you have to get more stuff. And all of a sudden there's like a different, I call it like a vibration. The business kind of vibrates different and you got to get used to that. Well, as you take on these new projects and you're going through a growth phase, you're doing well, so that's why you're getting that work. But now you're opening a new door to where all the real pain can start. And what happens is it's all about cash flow and the amount of money you need to execute on the new opportunity. Well, all the new opportunities you had before are easy to finance when you have a credit card. If they're $50,000, $100,000, $150,000, you can finance them on a credit card, or maybe you're getting deposits in advance. But once you start moving to a certain level, especially in construction, less deposits, more money up front, less money than you are given up front, or no money. And then what we're really good at is analyzing how much cash you need to help execute that new work, knowing that you know how to do it, provide the analysis of how much cash you need to execute the job, and then build a loan program that can help you get access to the money you need, plus the actual contract proceeds, figure it out exactly, and then provide that capital if it works for us and works for you.
Yeah, and we were early in our journey, we were a customer of yours, and you were helpful for that exact purpose. It's funny that you outline it that way, where it's like as you become more successful, the problems start, and that's what happened with us. Was we had the great news was our business was growing, but the bad news for us was that our accounts payable were growing, and so when we basically had a checking account in my name, that became a big problem. So we were thankful for you guys to help us really finance that early growth.
Yeah, you're a great example of that, because sometimes it's an accounts payable problem, sometimes it's accounts receivable problem, sometimes it's both. Sometimes it's just that champagne moment. Like, let's say you and I are hammered away. We created these cool hats, and like we're selling them to every pro shop on earth. When me and you walk in, and we're getting orders for $10,000, $5,000. We're financing those on our credit card or personal account. And then you walk into Dick's Sporting Goods one day, and you come out with an order for 1 million hats. They want to put 100 of them in 500 stores, right? And you're like, we're excited, but then we both take a breath for a second and realize, oh my gosh, how are we going to possibly finance $1 million order? Because I don't have 500 grand on my credit card.
Right.
We don't have it in the account. And so that's the scenario that is created all the time. It's that champagne moment. You're like, yes, you've done all this hard work and you've created this opportunity. And with that opportunity comes a new challenge. Mm-hmm. Banks don't want to finance that. Traditional financing doesn't want to really look at that. And that's right where we can come into play to help.
So how did you find your way to serve the customers in this industry? Because I've known you now for a few years, and not to go all the way back, but you had a medical sales background. So how did you kind of find your way into serving this niche in the market?
So I've been around construction. My dad was a commercial glazer. He had glass and aluminum business. So, I worked in that business back when you couldn't even buy insulated glass finished. You had to buy regular glass, take it to the cutting table, cut it, then put it on spacers, insulate it yourself with the hot rubber gun, which I have plenty of burns still on my hands from trying to mess with that. Then you put it on top of a frame and steel that now comes to you that way, but you just used to create that. So that was all fabrication, and I watched their pain points and building all that. So I was always around construction, but the cash perspective, and actually, frankly, being in that made me never want to be in construction because I knew how hard of work it was. Sure. And when I got out of school, I went into sales, as you said. But how I got into construction finance was a friend of mine called one day, coming out of the downturn, 2013. A lot of stimulus is out there, a lot of opportunity. Most construction contractors that were still around were the best of the best. They weathered the storm, so to speak, of 2007, 2008, and coming out of that.
Right.
And a lot of that new work and a lot of that stimulus needed bonds, payment and performance bonds. And in order to get bonding, as everyone knows here, probably listen to this, or if you don't, it's harder or as hard as getting financing, maybe even harder, because to get an insurance company to give you a policy that says they will take on the risk of you if you don't perform or you if you don't pay, such that your customer now can cash in on that policy, it's not an easy thing to get. And one of the biggest requirements for getting bonding is to make sure that you understand your cash flow and that you have enough working capital to execute that. And so a friend of mine was working with some of the sureties and some of the brokers for the sureties and saw that as a pain point and said, well, why don't we create a lending program that can help you get the bonding you need, but also the working capital. And that was the genesis of how do we solve that problem. Now, obviously, that problem exists outside of the bonded jobs too.
Sure.
And so that's how it started.
Interesting. And so you've been at this really for 10 years, 11 years.
11 and a half years. We made our first loan in early 2013. We were incorporated in 2014 after we made about 4 or 5 loans throughout 2013. We kind of did one loan, see how it goes, make another loan, see how it goes.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. And so how have you seen the needs of the customer change over that time from when you started till now?
So we've changed a lot. The need is still the same. Like the same problem still exists. I don't think anyone's really mastered the solution inside the construction world. Like in other words, bonding companies aren't like, hey, we found a way to give you some cash up front, or hey, we're willing to take the risk. General contractors aren't handing out more money up front. Owner, developers, cities, state, municipalities, they're not handing general contractors this slush of funds and say, hey, go get the best subcontractors that you want, and let's get them going on the project early and get money moving.
Right.
So the problem's all still there. So that's where we really stepped in. So where things have changed, though, is I think people are starting to get a little more aware of, like, this is a real problem, how slow money moves on the project. It's a real problem that construction subcontractors are facing in trying to finance these projects for other people, at least bridging those 30, 45, 60-day gaps up front. And where it's showing up is the labor force is getting older and no one wants to join in on the party.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a problem for everyone. And I think there's some good conversations starting to be had around that, but not any great solutions.
So, and this is a dumb question. Traditionally, people would think of banks as the lender to help these contractors. Is it because of the size of the loan needed is too small for banks to want to participate, or it's just harder to get financing approved through a bank? Like how? Clearly, there was the opportunity for your company to step in. Why is that?
So traditional financing, which I would say banks, or even like private lenders that are more let's say, up market, similar to a bank, right? The reason they don't really lend to construction or work in progress or performance-based or milestone-based companies is because they don't take performance risk. Their banks are willing to lend to assets and some percentage of your assets, or they'll look at cash flow and cash flow as it relates to what you've been cash flowing and where it's at in the process. Right. And so if you think about those two things, well, and you're a construction company and you have this new project, okay, well, it's not an asset yet because a contract isn't an asset. A receivable is, like what you've invoiced the customer is technically an asset if they owe it to you. The construction companies, it's not a real estate dominant market, so you can't collateralize it with real estate. Equipment has its own challenges, but yet there's a lot of equipment lenders out there that can lend on the equipment because that has value. And so it also takes a lot of effort and energy. And then on top of that, banks need people to be super buttoned up. And let's just face it, a lot of construction contractors early on, their finances aren't like it's not like they were a bunch of accountants that got into construction and also know how to do construction work. Wow. So it's a challenge. And so you're missing like the 2-3 key things that a bank needs are kind of absent in the industry. And it's not a problem. It's not like somebody's doing something wrong. It's just, that's why.
Yeah. There's just not a comfort level. Like, it's interesting because you have to know how the industry works so well in order to service it, right? Because you mentioned all of like cash flow clearly is probably the number one issue for contractors. Would you agree?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Way more than profit.
Yeah. And so you have all of these challenges that start a project, right? With, how long it takes to get a draw. But then additionally, on the backside, you have retainage too on so many, right? So not only is it an upfront problem, but it's a problem at the end, right?
Yeah. You know what the biggest problem is? Everybody knows what the problems are, but no one wants to pretend, no one wants to really discuss it.
So, why do you think that is?
Because it's not to their distinct advantage. The way the construction system is set up, you have the developers or owners, let's just say. And I don't mean individuals, because this could very easily be a city or municipality or a state or the federal government even. Then you have a general contractor who's really taking the risk on for that owner, developer, or municipality. And then they're hiring a series of subcontractors for all the specialty trades because no one general contractor does all the work themselves.
Right.
And so you have significant risk in performance and significant risk in payment. And construction happens to be an industry that the average ticket isn't a few $1,000s. I mean, you're building buildings, you're building roads. I mean, these are expensive items.
Right.
So you have a higher level of risk just by pure nature of the amount of dollars. Then you have performance attached to that. And you have everybody being like bound up the chain. So you have the developer owner passing risk down, which obviously lands on the subcontractor because it comes through the GC and down.
Right.
And you have the sub trying to de-risk themselves by passing it up the chain. And so if you have a lender that plugs in there, they're trying to find the, quote, highest credit in the chain and attaching themselves to that, which then creates more pain points when everyone else is trying to de-risk themselves. And so that works. That's a big piece of it, man. Honestly, that's like being in the middle of it and working up and down that chain as much as we have in the last 11 years. That's a huge piece to the psychology of it, which limits everyone's desire to really solve the problem. Because in order to really solve the problem, everybody's going to have to give a little. And there's a lot of people that have to give, and it's going to be even harder conversation. And it's project by project.
Yeah, when there's that many people involved, you're never going to get everyone to agree to give a little.
It's almost impossible. It's hard. Yeah, it's definitely hard. And so what we've done, and this is a shift kind of in our business halfway through, what we've learned the hard way, which we can get into if you want, but one of the biggest shifts we made probably 5 or 6 years in is we realized quickly that we can't operate that way, because that's why people don't want to get into construction and finance. Now, make no mistake, there's not a lot of people doing it, but there's thousands of people that tried, including the banks. And every time someone tries, there's a phrase that someone told me one time, every time someone tries to get into construction finance, they dip their toe in the water and they lose their leg. And what he meant by that is, if you don't really understand it and you try to plug into it the same way you would normally plug into a financeable situation, you're going to get hit hard. Someone's going to get hurt. So what we did, and we tried that with Fleet too, we used to think a contract was, hey, if someone had a contract, they'll like get paid. As long as we lend a little bit to help them get started, it'll ultimately get paid back on the contract. So, and yes, that's true if everything works perfectly and you know everything going into it, which leads me to some of the other issues that aren't there. But the point is, I was trying to make is, as you get into the actual lending of the job, you've got to be able to analyze that whole cash flow and see where it's at and really truly help all parties in the chain. If you can help the subcontractor in a meaningful way that benefits them, that also is great for their customer and great for the execution of the project, meaning performance is focused on first, then you actually are adding value to the overall project, which helps the sub, helps the GC, it helps the owner. And despite the GC or the owner may not even know what mobilization funding is, or the fact that the electrical contractor, plumbing, or site contractor is using us,
Sure.
we know. And because we know, and it's helping our customer, then they perform. Everybody cares about performance. They don't care about price. Everyone talks about price too. Like, oh, I'm going to keep this price. I want the lowest price. For some people do. But what they care about most is performance.
Sure.
You have to care about all three.
Yeah, this is something I do want to get into, because the reason for
These sit-down podcasts and interviews is I like to learn from others, based on our experience, right? And so, like, our experience at Heave has been, we started doing one thing, and then we're paying attention to certain trends in the market, paying attention to our customers, and we've had to change our business a few times. And even now with what we're doing, that we know we're fulfilling this value, and we're really proud of what we're doing, we constantly have to change. And so I'm like fascinated by, and then the more research you do about with successful companies, you find that it's the same way. It's like, because people throw cliches out, either you're changed or you're dying, but it seems like 95% of companies just want to do the same thing until they die. So I'm curious as to like how at MF your journey has changed over time. What you've decided to focus on, and maybe little tweaks you've made over time.
Well, the biggest theme is early on, we saw this as an opportunity where we could finance businesses and make a ton of money. Mm-hmm. And so we've said, if we lend into this and we get paid, and it's going to be easy because we're going to use the same systems that sureties use and these funds control agents. Did we really care about the customer as much when we first started? Probably not. Mm-hmm. We cared if they cared. We cared if it worked out.
Sure.
But we didn't truly care, like, compared to what I know we do now, or we've done in the last 4 or 5 years. Even 5 years in, it's not that we didn't care, but did we care about the GC as much as we cared about the sub? No. Did we care about the performance of the project overall? No. We cared about the sub, and did they get it done? If not, you get paid. You're owed the money.
Right.
You can, and they probably are. None of that's not true. But the reality of the situation is, if there's a problem on the project and money's not going to move, regardless of whether you're quote owed or not, it's just not going to move, then you probably should figure out how to make the whole project work well. And so you can either adapt to that and see if you can find a solution of how you can plug into that, or you can continue to bang your head against the wall and have problems. And if you're looking for a long-term solution where you can add a lot of value to the industry through a subcontractor's performance, which helps the overall project of the general contractor and the project owner, then you can really be successful.
It's funny because it seems like what you discovered was, hey, if we understand the customer better and understand the overall, just how the business works, that's a differentiator, which is kind of silly to say because you think that all companies that have customers want to understand their customer. Yeah. But that's what it seems like from where we sit in your kind of growth and success, is because you just went on this mission to understand the needs of your customers a lot better than what a typical lender does. You're not like rolling up to a job site in a suit and tie like maybe the perception of a banker is.
Yeah. The other thing that made the biggest difference is I learned that you have to provide value. Everyone's saying, yeah, of course. But
Sure.
you have to provide value first. If you want someone to trust you, you have to trust them first.
Mm-hmm.
If you want someone to work with you, you have to give them something that's gives them a reason to work with you first, with no expectation of anything in return. And everyone says that, like the golden rule, do unto others as you want done to
Sure.
you, but they don't do it.
Right.
And so what we did, and it was a very deliberate shift, is we tried to make loans. That's what we did. We tried to make loans. We tried to find good customers that we could make loans to. And a lot of people would say, oh, that's perfect. What do you mean? What I mean, though, is we still want to just make loans. What we do now is we try to find customers that we can help. I don't care what loan it is, what loan amount it is, what pre-qualify this, pre-qualify that. I just want to help people that we can help, that we're aligned to. And so no one wants to be interviewed when they come and call you through an application process. And yes, we have an application process.
Sure.
But what I realized is in 2019, we knew 5 years in now, 5.5 years in, you kind of figure out the top 10 problems that people have that you're ideally trying to help.
Right.
And we started addressing those and being experts in them. So when you say, like, was I in sales? Yes. Could I help them with sales? No, they're pretty good at getting work. But what they need help with is cash flow. They need help with knowing the things they need to know in advance. They need help with figuring out, okay, I got this awesome bid and I know how to bid, but I also have a calendar and a schedule I need to keep. But I don't know how to. Why are some jobs go smooth and why don't some others?
It's interesting because you wrote a book on cash
educating.
flow.
Yeah.
And so did you find it difficult where customers would not admit to you that they didn't know anything about cash flow? Because you have people who are running like really successful businesses, probably doing 40 million in revenue, 100 million in revenue, and they might not know about cash flow, but that's kind of an embarrassing thing maybe to admit that I don't really know much about cash flow. I could learn. Like, did you ever encounter that?
All the time. And so what we try to do, and I didn't know cash flow either, by the way. At the same time, I'm running a business. I'm from sales. So if you think I knew finance all perfectly, I did not.
You didn't study finance in college?
No finance in college. I got a very low SAT score that doesn't even have a comma in it. And the point of the whole point is I had to figure it out. But fortunately, I figured it out through the pain of our own customers. And so they would explain these things. And what we learned is if we educate people to where the weak spots are, instead of going out and asking them all these questions and they're uncomfortable telling you these things, if you just educate to them and you are asking experts via a podcast or a webinar or on a social post, and you're pouring out education to them to say, hey, these are the top 5 problems we hear about, or we hear about this problem. Let me tell you a story how you overcame it. Here's a situation and a problem, and here's how you overcame it. Here's another situation, how you overcame it. So instead of being this voice of, oh, here's another victim smoked by the GC, blah, 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 or here's another victim denied by the bank, we just start educating people how to be not a victim, how to be like, here's the information you need to know. Here's how you can educate yourself. Here's the answers. Here's the info.
So this is the value that you're talking about, right? The value that you're giving to the market is education, which is really, it's a marketing strategy, right? It's like, here's what we see, and that helped you kind of break down those walls?
Yeah, so what happened is now someone can learn about mobilization funding on their own time over however many years they want by listening to what we say, seeing who we talk to, listening to the expert that comes on the podcast or goes on our webinar, or that we bring on and educate to, or the solutions we pass on. They try those solutions out in the real world. They have some success with them. That builds trust. They come back and say, all right, you know what, if I do end up having a loan problem, if I need to get a loan, or I actually grew my business by implementing some of these strategies, or not implementing our strategy, but I'm just growing, who are you going to give a shot to? At least they call us and give us a shot. And if we can help them with our direct program, great, then we do. And instead of calling a bunch of people to say, hey, do you need a loan for your project? Or, hey, next time you need a project, call me with your loan. Like, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, a lot of people still try that, but yeah.
Yeah, but what they did was, like, to your point is, instead of selling them, they call us now because they've had all the time in the world without us asking for anything in return, and we didn't even know who they might be, but they've seen the podcast or they've listened to the social posts, and then you got to deliver on what you say you are. So when someone calls, they're going to marry up what they feel and talk to us about in context of how they have a feeling of what they think we are.
When you make a loan to a customer, and these are construction projects that are going on, are you guys kind of an advisor throughout the process? Like, are you looking at their cash flows, throughout the course of the project? Very few projects go according to plan, right? There's always delays or things that happen. Like, I imagine that you guys are there throughout the project to help, like, offer advice, or like, what is that typical relationship in the course of a project?
Yeah, so we learned up front, and one of the things we learned early on is if you don't know what the cash flow of the project is, outside of just your bid, here's what I'm bidding, here's my costs and expenses, and here's the amount I'm going to, my contract's for, and I should make this much money. Mm-hmm. If you don't know how those expenses side of your bid is going to be spent, meaning you don't know if you're going to have to invest 50% of those expenses, 25% of those expenses before you're cash flow positive or before the quote project cash flows itself, you can get in a real pickle. Like, you can get 50, 60% of that way out there, and you realize, oh man, I thought I had to invest $200,000 into this $2 million project, but I actually need to invest $700,000 before I get any cash flow, before I'm cash flow positive. That's two totally different scenarios. Like, where is that extra $500,000 going to come from? Other projects, well, we know what kind of problems that exists. Operations, what if you don't have it in operations? Savings, what if you don't have it? Loans, what if you don't have a lender? And so if you're going into a project thinking you're going to spend $250,000 to execute a $2 million project, and it turns out to be $700,000, that 500 gap, you're going to feel. And the problem, Alex, is that you start to feel it way too late. Like, it shows up and you're saying to yourself something like, if they would just pay me the last 2 invoices I got plenty of money. But you realize, well, you signed up to get paid under the terms you're getting paid. They shouldn't pay you earlier if you signed up to be paid in 45 days. Sometimes they sign up 30 and pay you in 45, but you also knew that's a likelihood too. So what we learned is if we make loans without knowing what the cash flow is, 2 things can happen. They can get hurt. There's just too much risk to it. So we started building the cash flow for our own good to underwrite it. And what we learned was it provided so much value up front that contractors, more often than not, like 95% of the time, they're able to actually see the issue and problem that we point out to them. Like, hey, there's an issue here. You're going to have to invest $700,000 instead of 2. Well, why is that? Well, actually, it's the terms that you have with your large supplier for the main source of materials that you have to order 30 days in. If you can get that extended to 60 days or paid when paid or something different, then you really only need $250,000.
Oh, wow. So you're making suggestions with,
or your labor is the issue. And we're not even making sense. We're just showing it to them. Like, you showing us exactly how you have to spend the capital or how you have to spend your expenses to execute the job. We marry that up to what you expect you're going to invoice every month. 2 things that every contractor knows how to do. But we organize it in a model that shows where these gaps are. And so when they see them, that's the coolest part. Most people think they don't know what to do, but the reality is they're not aware of it up front. And so what we're showing them is exactly the information, and then the beauty is they know exactly what to do. Sometimes it's, I can't do this project because I'm going to get hosed. Sometimes it's, I'm going to go to a different supplier. I was actually only using that one because I was trying to save 10%. They gave me better pricing, but it actually makes a lot more sense for me to go ahead and pay a higher price for that. They'll give me better terms, and I can cash flow this job. I still make good money.
I imagine that you're exposed to like contractors where their estimating teams are completely different skill levels too, right? It seems like estimating is such a huge part of a contractor's business, and you probably see a discrepancy between the talent and for contractors, right?
Yeah, and sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's when did they estimate it and when is the project starting? Did they put terms in there that, like, if you buy out a project today on a bid and it doesn't start for 6 months and you've been in the climate we've just been in, those prices are going to be significantly different.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, do you see that? Because I've heard plenty of horror stories from contractors where materials are always changing. The price is always changing, like monthly almost.
100%. Every 2 weeks. Sometimes you get a price on that. It's good for the week.
Phew.
Depending on what it is. When there's concrete shortages, there's block shortages, there's lumber.
That breaks the model, doesn't it?
It does. So you have to build those into your costs. You have to make sure you know, but you have to build that into your clauses. You can't just throw a huge contingency. You have to say, hey, here's the pricing for this now. It is only good for this amount. Before we execute a contract, I have to buy this out again. And put your price escalations in there.
What have you guys experimented with different offerings or products for contractors over time that, you know, some maybe didn't work? Or because what we've found is, you know, the joys of a young company, or we're constantly throwing different stuff against the wall, and oh, that didn't work, but you know what, if we tweak these three things, then there's the winner. Like, have you experimented like that?
We've experimented with ways of lending our same loan program, but we haven't really lent like other forms of lending in our space might be factoring or term loans, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've never ventured down those paths because they're totally separate fundamental ways to lend money, or in factoring's case, buy receivables.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just not something that we're good at. You know, like, we've learned through hard pain and attrition how to be good at what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And there's there's plenty of opportunity there, and there's plenty of opportunity with that people know how to factor. There's plenty of factoring companies. There's
Right.
plenty of
That's all they do.
That's all they do. And there's something to be said about getting really good at what you do and being a master at that, so you can totally add value.
Mm-hmm.
And you need focus to be able to do that. If you spread yourself too thin, you can get hurt pretty bad.
Yeah, everybody has that itch when things are, you know, you're going things are going well, and you're like, oh, what if we added A, B, and C to the business? But you're right. It's like everybody learns that kind of hard lesson is like, but we're not very good at that. Like, you can't just, you know, introduce this new product and, you know, what you're doing today, you're experts at.
Yeah, and in the construction industry, it's a huge market. Like, if we were in this market that was only a couple $100,000 in size annually,
Sure.
yeah, you probably need to expand. It's probably bad business, right? But
You're right.
we're measuring construction work in trillions of dollars. So if you can get really good at that niche in the construction world to solve that problem, there's plenty of opportunity there. And in order to be great at something, like I got some great guidance in probably 2018. So if you're an entrepreneur, which a lot of business owners are, you got to ask yourself the golden question of, what do you want to be the best in the world at? And if you are the best in the world at whatever it is you're trying to do, what is it going to take to be the best in the world? And if you're spreading your energy over 2, 3, 4 different buckets, you're not going to get there. Like, so you have to be the best in the world at something first before you try to, quote, like, vertically integrate something or expand your business line. And a lot of people think you can be the best in the world at something in a few years, and you're not. Like, you could get lucky, but really, truthfully, to be the best in the world at something, it's going to take much closer to 10 years. And lots of pain and attrition and that vibration I talked about before you should try to think about being something else.
I'm asked a lot about our vision, like our goals for the future. If I was to ask any of your employees, like, what's Mobilization Funding's like vision? Like, where will they be in 10 years? What would they tell me?
They tell you that we want to be the best in the world at financing commercial construction contractors and other businesses on the revenue cycles and growth that they're trying to accomplish in their business.
They wouldn't tell me invoice factoring or anything like that?
No. In fact, they would tell you we have plenty of invoice factoring that we can refer you to. We can tell you who we think the best ones are for you based on your specific scenario. But they know we're really good at what we do, and that's all we're trying to accomplish.
I mean, and I forget this a lot, I mean, because you're a local Tampa guy, but your footprint is very large already today. Like, you have customers across the country?
Yeah, coast to coast, across the country. There's some states we do more business in than others.
Sure.
But those are the states doing more construction than others, or have more favorable laws for construction, or more favorable opportunity for people that want to grow, build something, you know. So that's where our business is. But we're not agnostic to any certain area. We can lend to anyone.
Oh, very cool. One of the things we like to kind of get into here is the labor shortage in the industry. You deal with a lot of contractors. You've been doing this a while. Where do you see the future of the industry? What is your opinion on why we continue to have a labor shortage? It hasn't changed at all since I started, since 2004. We seem to continue the same talking points, but curious to get your feedback on it.
Well, I agree with you. There's definitely a labor issue. It's becoming more prominent, more problematic. The obvious reasons are people are getting older. the workforce is getting older, and you have more people exiting than you do have entering, right? And so if you think about the value proposition to a laborer entering the construction field, they don't perceive it as something valuable to them. So why is that? Well, that's on the construction industry. You know, they're either not telling a good enough story, they're not informing people about what the real opportunities are, or they're not providing something that new audience needs to hear. And so we both know that the construction industry is very vibrant. There's more opportunity in construction than I think in any other industry. To me personally, and I've said this a million times, what other industry could you really enter with expert skills in finance, expert skills in operations, expert skills in a trade, expert skills in leadership, anything like that, and manage small companies, public companies, tiny companies, huge companies, every company size in between. There's very few industries you could do that in. Construction is one of them.
Yeah. It's one of the things that drives me crazy is when people like to blame the labor force. They're like, we have this problem because people are lazy. Like, I was lazy when I was young. You know, like, you have to teach people, right? Like, it's crazy to me that we want to just blame and I'm sure every generation thinks that the generation after them is lazier than them. And, you know, it's probably true in certain senses. I mean, I have young kids, my kids, but I was lazy too. But it just gets you nowhere by blaming them. You know, I agree with you. I think the story isn't told, but now you have people like Aaron Witt, who I know you guys have participated in their Dirt World Summit. So have we. I know you've been on his podcast. I've had him on here. He's really one of one, like, telling that story of the industry. I think it's economic driven as well. We don't seem to focus on that part. You know, there's some talk about how, college shouldn't be the only path. But I also think that some of the wages in this industry have been suppressed. And I think that's a compelling story if you say, hey, you won't have to have college debt and you can make X per year. I think that has to go hand in hand. But yeah, it's just frustrating that we seem to have the same conversation and no movement, and people act surprised as to why it remains the issue.
Yeah. We talked about that when I was on his podcast. A lot of the labor, they don't know what they don't know, right? So if you go to college, you come out, talk to a lot of kids coming out of college, they also don't know what they want to do, right? So is the construction industry meeting people there and showing them like other industries might be? I don't know. Probably not, though, if you're not getting those folks in. You also have to realize there's a different mindset to your average person that's entering the workforce today than there might have been when we entered it 25 years ago and someone else did 35 years ago or 45 years ago. And so, like, you gotta, as leaders of the industry in the business that you're in, you have to go meet people where they're at. You can't just force them up to where you're at. We have different experiences.
You have to cater to the message. Yeah.
And so what is that message? And you have to care enough to do it and really solve the problem.
The message should be, you're lazy. You're lazy, and you should just go into construction because there's a lot of opportunity. Stop being lazy.
Yeah. And everybody, it's definitely different than today's world, probably globalistically, throughout our country anyway, in terms of like how people have grown up, what we celebrate, what we don't, what things are good, what things are bad. When I grew up, it was all about winning. There's first place and second place, and that was it. And my parents told us, like, you either win or you lose. And if you lose, what'd you learn? And if you win, what'd you learn? And you're not as good as you think you are. You're not as bad as you think you are. I don't know if that's a consistent message today. It's probably not the same message I've given my kids either. I try. Yeah,
the messaging is interesting because I think it can get a little off track. I'm a big believer there's multiple ways to look at something. I don't want to say it's a problem, but I think one of the challenges is, like, the messaging seems follow what you're passionate about, and I think that's kind of funny because, like, I'm kind of like what you described. When I finished college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. we kind of covered your background. I don't think you dreamed of writing a cash flow book. You didn't even take one accounting class. But there's times in your life where if you observe and you can just find opportunity, like that to me, I probably didn't do a very good job of like building that up as a message, but I think we do a disservice if we continually talk to people about like passionate, like what you have to love what you do. It's like I've grown to love what I do because I find purpose in what we're doing, but it's not something that I necessarily dreamed about,
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to how do you find passion in what you'd want to do, right? Well, if you're 20-something years old, 21, 22, and you're just getting out of school, do you really have enough perspective to know what you're passionate about?
No, you haven't tried anything.
Right. So, like, go try different things. And what happens about passion and be passionate and find out what you're passionate about and then find that opportunity. The truth is you're going to suck at everything you do for the first time. And who wants to go do something you suck at? No one.
It's hard.
But what you have to realize is that that's part of the process. And so you become passionate by sucking at something for so long until you don't, until you're good at it. And then you become passionate about it. And so what you just need to be passionate about is the outcome of finding success on a journey, developing who you are, getting new experiences, and working your 100% ass off, best as you possibly can, deliver and show up every day to give your best, which isn't going to be enough most days.
Sure.
And some days it will be enough, and over time that will compound. And what happens is you ultimately become really good at something by first sucking at it, and then you become passionate about it because now you're good at it and you see where you can add
keep
value.
going back.
And you get rewarded along that way because when you start to help someone else, it becomes better. And another thing, if you're passionate about making money, you're never going to be happy because you can get money and not be happy. A lot of people are. And so it can't just be about money. It has to be about how can you help. My personal opinion is how can you be passionate about helping someone, figure out a way to do that, and then be as great as you possibly can at it every single day until you become really good at it and great at it and productive at it. And then you will start to see those rewards. And by the way, the money then comes after that. And if you can figure that out early, if anyone listens to nothing else other than what I'm saying now, that's the real truth to that.
Yeah.
And that's it.
I think you might have started to answer this, but one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, because it's kind of timely and topical, is that it's graduation season now. And, so there's a lot of commencement addresses. If you were to give what college did you go to?
Keuka College.
Keuka?
No one ever heard of it. Keuka. It's a little school in the Finger Lakes.
So, they say, hey, let's have Scott Peper #1 on all-time scoring list back to give the commencement address. What would the themes of your commencement address be?
I would tell them that whatever you're going to go out and do, it's going to be 10 times harder than you think it's going to be. That no one owes you anything. The fact that you just got a degree is cool, but nobody cares. Whether you believe it's fair or not, it's not fair out here. There are absolutely people who have an easier way, and there's people who have a harder way. Everything great that you'll ever do will be found doing it the hardest possible way you can. Taking the easy road is never going to lead to where you want to go. And then I would tell them that if you don't show up every day and give your absolute best and realize you don't know shit and that you're going to continuously focus on learning, you probably won't be successful. And so if you could do anything, just realize that this is the end of one chapter and you're back at the beginning. Just like if you're a college athlete, you'd be a high school all-star, and then all of a sudden you're struggling when you're in college. It's the same thing. Out in the real world, the truth is there's people that win and there's people that lose. And everybody has the same opportunities. No one was blessed with some magic pill. There's not this, like, as a mentor of mine says, Andy Frisella, there's no success fairy that comes down and taps you on the head and says, congratulations, you're going to be one of the winners and these are the rest. Everyone has the same choices and opportunities. You might start in a different place. There's no point in focusing on that, but you should just get out and work hard every day, and your journey is going to be your journey, and those blessings will come.
What advice do you hear that's commonly given that you think is bad advice?
Well, I think people say find something you're passionate about and then go pursue it. I think it's probably not bad advice. I just think it's misguided for some people, depending on what you're talking to. Mm-hmm. I think motivation, people say, you got to stay motivated or get motivated. The real truth is, I wish I knew this earlier, you got to get really good at the mundane BS every day, because it's those little things consistently over time, and having the discipline to do them over and over and over and over and over again for years is where you really get good at something that then creates enough value that someone wants to compensate you for that. And that's the hard thing to do, man. You don't take big swings. They're not going to get you. There's no big hit. There's no big home run.
No shortcuts.
There's no shortcuts. Just if you're set with two paths and there's two choices, pick the hardest one every time and pay attention, because there's going to be more gifts down that road, more things to equip you with, whether it's skills, attributes, or knowledge. And those are the pieces of advice that I think people need to focus on. I think if it's going to take way longer than you think it's going to take, and the expectation that you did something or had done something, and so forth, someone should respect you, or I'm entitled to that. You might be in your mind, but you have to prove that to someone. And so if you could just change your mentality, I'm going to go serve and help people. Maybe it's just help your boss. I'm going to help that company. Take the hardest path every time and learn what you need to learn. That's the best advice I would give someone. And I think the worst advice is anything contrary to that.
Who do you think the best coach is in sports, like that you've seen in your lifetime?
There's a lot of great coaches, man. If I'm going basketball wise, I think, I've listened to some stuff Gino Auriemma said lately.
He's a Philly guy.
Yeah. Really smart. He's not wrong. I think Mike Krzyzewski, I think there's a good balance between the stuff that even Pat Snyder was my high school coach, but emulated Bobby Knight. So it was Bobby Knight, I was going to say.
What makes Coach K so great?
I think he goes down and meets people where they are. He explains exactly how it's going to be, and then he holds everybody accountable to it. Like, if you're not being held accountable, so then they trust him. And there's things he does that says I don't love, but I think from a coaching perspective, you just can't have that kind of consistent attraction of talent. And look, Duke's a beautiful place, but if you're going to go anywhere in the country, it isn't the best campus on earth. It's not the best college experience on earth.
Yeah, and he wasn't. I mean, we think of him in a certain way today, but I think he was like a 500 coach his first 6 years, something like that.
Well, look at John Wooden just died, right? Or no, he didn't just die, but Bill Walton just died. But John Wooden died 10 years ago, but he lost like 10 years in a row, and then he won 10 out of 12.
Right.
So, yeah, 10 out of 12 is what everyone talks about, but no one wants to hear about the first 10 years. Did he quit? Was he a great coach? No, he sucked. And so he's a great example. He's a great example of what we do, and he trusted his process and what we just talked about. Those are the best coaches. I think the best coaches, though, in general, because, everyone says, oh, how do I go find and emulate them? You want to find the best coaches are the ones that are honest with you. They're sharing experience with you for things they've actually done. I think coaching, I think getting a coach, I think having a mentor is really critical, but it should be someone that you want to be, that you'd want to emulate who they are, their character, their people, and something that they've done, not something they've taught. And I think that's part of the problem with school now too, is you have a lot of teachers that are teaching stuff that they've never done before. And inherently they're just not going to be right.
What about football coaches?
To me, Nick Saban's the best coach. There's enough out there to see what he says, how he says it, what he does, how his standards, and that's the other piece. Like, you got to hold yourself to the highest standard consistently, day in, day out. He'll tell you the same thing about daily.
That's who I thought of when you were saying the mundane. That's who I thought of.
Yeah, I was told that by a mentor of mine, that all the secret is in literally doing the simple things over and over and over again every single day consistently, and tend to take those big swings for something. That's not how you really move the needle.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense to me. I remember seeing this like Brad Stevens interview. It was when Butler had gone to like back-to-back final games, and it was on HBO. So they do like this big profile on Butler because, you know, obviously, like, what are they doing in the national championship game 2 years in a row? And the guy was asking him, like, what's your secret? What's, you know, what they did was they started reading off the recruiting budget at Butler, too. And it was like, Butler, $75,000 a year. It's like University of Kentucky, $1 million a year. What's your secret? And he's like, there is no secret. He's like, we, you know, find really smart players. We teach a certain way to play, and we hold people accountable. He's like, everybody thinks there's a secret. But if you truly hold people accountable, which is hard to do, like that can create success and results. That always stuck with me. I mean, I think it's been like 10 years, 11 years since they went, but it was.
Yeah, and you got to have consistent standards for everyone. You have to have a set of common goals and that you want to have. We learned that at Mobilization Funding too, the hard way also.
Sure.
You know, we didn't have that. Not everyone was on the same page. You know, most companies, one thing I learned from corporate America is they're not on the same page. Finance will blame sales. Sales will blame marketing.
Yep.
Marketing will blame sales. The executive leadership will blame a department. Someone will blame operations. The reality is if everyone's sitting on the same page, if you don't succeed, which is whatever the company goal initiative is everyone failed. Because everyone has a role. And a basketball team's a perfect example of that. Everyone has a role. Everyone has a common goal. If you don't have a common goal, then everyone's thinking, well, I did my part, or look at my stats. Like, you're dead. You're never going to win.
Yeah, and I know you have
long-term.
a relatively small team. We do as well. That's one of the bigger things that I enjoy is when you have a small team and you start from scratch, like you can select the people that you want. And so you can truly find people who all agree. Like the blame stuff is corporate America. It's one of the things I hated the most was the finger pointing. And when you have an organization that big, it's really hard to filter out that because it's just so many people, but can't stand it.
So, dude, in 2019, 5.5 years in this business, I've launched our core values. Not one single person that was in that meeting is with our company today, including 3 partners.
No.
Including 3 partners. So it is the most critical thing that you could possibly do in your business is launch your core values, get everybody on the same page. And the first person of the people we've hired since then, they're all with us today, except for one who just left to go work with his brother in Atlanta. He didn't really leave MF. He moved to his family. And so it is the most critical thing. And when I say like the people, yes, team, maybe we had 6 in that meeting, plus the 2 partners, 3 partners. Those 3 partners are not there, and none of the 6 are.
Wow.
And so, yeah, 5.5. The company's been around 11 years, but I'm the only person that's been there for the whole time.
And it was pretty clear from the values that you set that all those individuals didn't necessarily jive with those values.
You know, it wasn't so much that they didn't jive with the values. Like, our core values are pretty basic. You know, do the right thing, be humble, create the best customer experience, commitment to excellence, and leadership through action. Okay, who doesn't want to be down with that? But when you actually go put it into practice, not everybody's down with that. And if you don't, and when you're holding people accountable to it, and they have their ego gets in the way, or their self-interest get in the way, or they don't trust someone else, they ultimately breaks. Until you get everybody on the same page, rowing in the same direction with the same core principles and values, you're never going to be as successful as you can. You certainly aren't going to be the best in the world at something.
Well, that's awesome. Well, thanks for your time. I appreciate you stopping by in person. It's always good to catch up and to hear more about your guys' story and the value you provide in the market.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. And
Awesome.
I love what you guys are doing too.
Thank you.
And I love the twist. Last time I was here, you guys were doing something completely different, and I love it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I think
Thanks,
it's
Scott.
going to be lots of success.
Thank you.